She arrived the same way she always did, quietly and without hurry. No one noticed when she stepped into the wide public hall, and she seemed used to that. Her coat was plain, her shoes worn but clean, and her hands were tucked into her pockets as if she were trying to take up as little space as possible. The building was busy that afternoon, filled with voices, footsteps, and the echo of people passing through with their own plans and worries. Everyone seemed to be going somewhere important. She was not. She paused just inside the entrance, letting others move around her. People brushed past without looking, eyes fixed on phones or signs or the floor ahead. She did not mind. In many ways, being unseen felt safer. It was how she had lived most of her life, on the edges, never demanding attention, never asking for more than she needed. Across the hall, against one long wall, sat an old piano. It was impossible to miss, yet most people did. The wood was scratched and dull, the finish long faded. Several keys were chipped, and a few were a different shade, clearly replaced years ago. A small sign rested on top, crooked and ignored, warning that the instrument was damaged and not maintained. It had likely been there for decoration more than music. The woman noticed it right away. Her steps slowed as she looked at it, her eyes softening in a way they had not when she first walked in. Something about the piano pulled her attention, like a familiar voice calling from far away. She stood still for a moment, listening not to sound, but to memory. Long ago, music had been her only comfort. It had filled small rooms and quiet nights when words were hard to find. She had learned to listen before she learned to speak up, to feel before she dared to be seen. Music asked nothing of her except honesty. It never judged her for being quiet. She did not approach the piano. Not yet. Instead, she found a seat nearby, one of the many benches lined along the wall. She sat with her back straight and her hands folded neatly in her lap. To anyone watching, she looked like someone waiting for time to pass. People nearby talked loudly. Some laughed. A few complained about delays and noise. A group of younger people gathered not far from the piano, joking and nudging one another. They glanced at the instrument now and then, smirking as if it were a joke placed there for their amusement. One of them tapped a key with a finger. The sound was sharp and wrong. The group laughed. The woman flinched slightly, though she tried not to show it. She looked down at her hands. They were steady, but only because she willed them to be. She had learned long ago that talent did not always invite kindness. Sometimes it brought expectations, and expectations could hurt more than silence. So she kept her past to herself. No one here knew how many hours she had spent practicing in empty rooms. No one knew how often she had played when no one was listening, or how many times music had saved her from giving up on herself, to the people around her. She was just another face in the crowd. A simple woman with nothing special to offer. That was fine with her. She watched the group by the piano. Out of the corner of her eye, they were bored, clearly killing time. One of them joked loudly about how anyone could sound good on such a terrible instrument. Another dared someone else to try. More laughter followed. She shifted on the bench, unsure why her chest felt tight. She told herself she had no reason to care. She was not here for that. She had only come to wait, to rest her feet, to let the afternoon pass. Still, her gaze drifted back to the piano again and again. She remembered the first piano she had ever touched. It had been older than this one, missing more than a few keys, but to her, it had felt alive. She had been young then, small hands reaching for sound she did not yet understand. No one had expected much from her back then either. She had surprised them, though the surprise never lasted. Life had a way of pushing her back into quiet corners. A loud voice nearby pulled her back to the present. "Look at that thing," someone said, pointing at the piano. "It's basically useless." More laughter. The woman lowered her eyes. She stood slowly, unsure why she was standing at all. Perhaps she needed to stretch her legs. Perhaps she just needed to move. She took a few small steps, stopping again when she realized she was closer to the piano than before. The keys looked worn, like they had been touched by many hands, but cared for by none. She wondered when it had last been played with intention. She did not reach out. Not yet. People passed behind her, barely noticing she was there. Someone bumped her shoulder and muttered a quick apology without stopping. She nodded, though the person had already moved on. It occurred to her, as it often did, how easy it was for a person to disappear in plain sight. She exhaled slowly and told herself she was only imagining things. She had no plan, no desire to draw attention. She would sit back down soon. She always did, but she stayed where she was, standing near the piano. Close enough to hear the quiet creaks of the old wood as the building settled. Close enough to smell the dust and age. One of the group noticed her then. A glance. A raised eyebrow. A quick look shared with the others. She felt it immediately, the weight of being seen. Not with curiosity, but with amusement. She stiffened slightly, her shoulders drawing in. They looked her over, taking in her plain clothes, her careful posture. She could almost hear their thoughts, though no words were spoken yet. She looked away, hoping they would lose interest. They did not. The moment stretched, quiet and uncomfortable. The hall around them continued its noise. Unaware that something small but important was about to shift, she clasped her hands together, her fingers pressing lightly against each other. Her heart beat faster, though her face remained calm. She had no idea that this ordinary afternoon, this place she would normally forget by the next day, was about to change how others saw her, and perhaps, in a quiet way, how she saw herself. For now, she was still just a simple woman standing near a broken piano, surrounded by strangers who thought they knew exactly who she was. She could feel their eyes on her before anyone spoke. It was a familiar feeling, one she had known since she was young. Not the kind of attention that comes with kindness or interest, but the kind that carries quiet judgment. She kept her face calm, as if she hadn't noticed anything at all. One of them shifted closer to the piano, glancing at her again. He leaned back slightly and spoke just loud enough for others nearby to hear. "Hey," he said, pointing at the piano with his chin. "Looks like you're standing pretty close to that thing." A few people in the group chuckled. The sound wasn't cruel on the surface, but it wasn't friendly either. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. Her first instinct was to step away, to return to the bench, and disappear back into the background where she felt safest. She gave a small, polite smile. The kind meant to end a conversation before it began. "I was just looking," she said quietly. Her voice was soft, nearly lost in the noise of the hall, that only seemed to encourage them. "Why don't you try playing it?" Another voice said. "Since you're already here," more laughter followed. A few people nearby turned to watch, sensing something entertaining might happen. She shook her head gently. "No, thank you," she replied. "It's broken." "That's the point," someone else said. "Let's hear what it sounds like." They grinned at one another, enjoying the moment. It was clear they didn't expect anything serious. To them, it was just a way to pass time, a harmless joke at someone else's expense. Her hands tightened slightly at her sides. She looked at the piano again, then back at the group. She could walk away. No one was forcing her, yet something held her in place. She thought of all the times she had stayed silent when she wanted to speak. All the times she had stepped aside to avoid trouble or embarrassment. She had survived by being careful, by not standing out. This felt no different. "I really shouldn't," she said, her voice still calm. "I don't want to cause any trouble. Come on," one of them said, waving a hand. "It's not like anyone expects you to be good." The words landed harder than they probably meant them to. A few people laughed again, louder this time. She felt heat rise in her chest, a mix of embarrassment and something else she didn't like to name. She lowered her eyes, staring at the floor. She told herself it didn't matter. These were strangers. Their opinions would not follow her home. In a few minutes, everyone would forget this moment ever happened. But she also knew that if she walked away now, the laughter would stay with her longer than she wanted to admit. She took a slow breath. "I don't play much anymore," she said. "That's fine," someone replied quickly. "Neither does the piano." The group laughed again, pleased with the joke. A few people nearby smiled, waiting to see what would happen next. The woman glanced around the hall. People had stopped walking as fast. Some leaned against walls. Others pulled out their phones, not yet recording, but ready. The energy in the room had shifted. What had been an ordinary afternoon now felt like a small stage. She didn't like stages. Her heart beat faster. But her face remained composed. She had learned how to hide her nerves well. Years of keeping her feelings to herself had taught her that much. "I really don't want to embarrass myself," she said honestly. One of them shrugged. "We're just having a little fun. You don't have to take it so seriously." She almost laughed at that. For them, it was fun. For her, it felt like standing at the edge of something she had spent her life avoiding. She looked at the piano again. Up close, it seemed even more tired than before. Some keys sat lower than others. A few were cracked. It was clear the sound would be uneven, maybe even harsh. She wondered what kind of music could come from something so damaged. The group waited, watching her closely now. One of them tapped the bench in front of the piano. "Go on," he said. "Just one song," she swallowed. For a moment, she thought about her childhood, about playing late at night when everyone else slept, about how she had learned to adjust to broken strings, sticky keys, and pianos that were never quite right. She had learned to work with what she had. She realized then that the piano in front of her was not unfamiliar at all. She nodded once, slowly, as if agreeing more with herself than with them. "Just for a minute," she said. A ripple of excitement moved through the small crowd that had gathered. Some smiled, expecting a mess of wrong notes. Others leaned in, curious but doubtful. She stepped closer to the bench and rested her hand on it, steadying herself. The wood felt cool and worn. "Take your time," someone joked. She ignored the comment and sat down. The bench creaked under her weight. She adjusted her position slightly, then placed her hands in her lap. She did not touch the keys yet. The noise around her continued for a few seconds. Someone laughed. Someone else whispered. Then, slowly, the room began to quiet. She closed her eyes. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was simply something she had always done before playing, a way to center herself, to remember why she loved music in the first place. When she opened them again, her breathing was slower, steadier. She lifted her hands and hovered them above the keys. The group watched closely now. Their smiles still there, but less confident than before. A few people nearby crossed their arms, waiting. She pressed one key lightly, testing the sound. It rang out sharp and thin. A couple of people snickered. She didn't react. She pressed another key, then another, listening carefully. She adjusted the pressure of her fingers, feeling how the keys responded. Each sound told her something. She nodded to herself. The piano was broken, yes, but it still had a voice. She placed both hands on the keyboard, ready. Someone asked. She did not answer. Instead, she began. At first, it was slow. Simple notes carefully chosen. Nothing flashy. Nothing meant to impress. Just enough to understand the instrument, to feel its limits. The laughter faded. People who had been smiling leaned forward slightly. Conversations nearby stopped mid-sentence. She continued, her fingers moving with quiet confidence. She avoided the worst keys, worked around the damaged ones, and turned the uneven sound into something almost intentional. The piano, no longer, sounded like a joke. The woman remained focused, her face calm, her shoulders relaxed. It was as if the crowd around her had disappeared, and though no one realized it yet, the prank had already begun to fail. The first few notes had changed the air in the room. Something unexpected was happening, and everyone could feel it. The sound that came from the piano was not loud, but it carried. It moved through the hall in a way no one expected. At first, people thought it was just a few careful notes, nothing more. But the longer she played, the harder it became to ignore. The woman's fingers moved slowly, almost gently, as if she were speaking to the piano instead of playing it. Each note followed the next with purpose. Even the uneven sounds seemed to belong, as if she had planned them that way. A few people exchanged glances. The smiles on their faces began to fade, replaced by quiet confusion. "That doesn't sound bad," someone whispered. No one laughed this time, she continued, still calm, still focused. Her hands adjusted naturally, avoiding broken keys without hesitation. It was clear she had done this before, not with this piano, but with others like it. She knew how to listen, how to adapt. The hall grew quieter. Footsteps slowed. A man walking past stopped completely, turning his head toward the sound. A woman nearby lowered her phone, forgetting what she had been about to do. The group that had encouraged her to play stood frozen. What had started as a joke now felt uncomfortable. One of them crossed his arms, no longer smiling. The woman did not look at them. She did not look at anyone. Her mind was somewhere else. She remembered playing in empty rooms, letting music fill the space where words failed her. She remembered how she used to close her eyes and imagine that someone, somewhere, was listening, not to judge, but to understand. Now people were listening. She leaned into the music, letting it grow a little stronger. The melody became clearer, more confident. It was not fast or flashy, but it carried emotion. It told a quiet story, one that did not need explanation. The piano answered her as best it could. Some notes rang out clear, others dull and rough, but she made room for all of them. She didn't fight the instrument. She worked with it. A hush settled over the hall. Someone coughed and quickly covered their mouth as if afraid to interrupt. Another person shifted their weight but stayed still. The air felt different now, heavier, more focused. The woman's shoulders relaxed further. The tension she had felt earlier began to melt away. This was the place she knew best, not the hall, not the piano. But this feeling of being fully inside the music. Her fingers moved with more confidence now, pressing deeper, holding notes longer. The melody rose and fell, carrying hints of sadness and hope at the same time. A man near the back wiped his eyes without realizing he was doing it. No one spoke. The group who had started the prank, no longer looked amused. One of them glanced around, clearly aware that others were watching them now, not her. "She's good," someone muttered. The words sounded almost shocked. The woman played on, unaware of the effect she was having. Or perhaps she was aware but didn't care. She wasn't playing for them. She was playing because she always had. The piano creaked softly beneath her hands, but it held together. Each note felt like a small victory, not over the instrument, but over the moment that had almost silenced her. She shifted into a new section of the piece, letting the sound grow warmer. The broken keys added a rough edge, but instead of ruining the music, they gave it character. It felt real, honest. A child sitting nearby leaned closer to a parent and whispered, "Why is it so pretty?" The parent didn't answer. People who had been in a hurry now stood still, caught in something they hadn't expected to feel. Some closed their eyes. Others watched her hands, amazed at how steady they were. The woman's face remained peaceful. There was no sign of effort or fear, only focus. She thought briefly of how many times she had been told to stop dreaming, to be practical, to accept a smaller life. How often she had chosen silence over struggle. The music seemed to answer those memories. Turning them into sound, the melody softened again, growing quieter, more delicate. You had to listen carefully now. You would miss it. Everyone listened. One of the people who had laughed earlier shifted uncomfortably. He cleared his throat, but said nothing. The prank was gone. In its place was something real, something none of them could take back. The woman slowed her hands, letting the notes linger. Each sound faded gently into the air before the next one arrived. Time seemed to stretch. The hall, once full of noise, now felt like a private room. Strangers stood together and shared silence, connected by a moment they would remember. She reached the final part of the piece, her fingers moving with careful control. The piano responded with a soft, trembling sound. She held the last note longer than expected. Then she let it go. The sound faded. For a brief moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The woman's hands rested on the keys. Her breathing was slow and steady. She opened her eyes and looked down, as if just waking from a dream. She had no idea what she had just done to the room. She simply knew she was finished. Slowly, she lifted her hands and placed them in her lap. The silence remained. thick and heavy, filled with emotion and disbelief. And in that silence, everyone understood one thing clearly. They had been very wrong about her. The silence after the last note did not break right away. It stayed hanging in the air like something fragile. No one seemed to know what to do with it. People stood still, afraid that even a small sound might ruin what they had just felt. The woman remained seated at the piano, her hands resting quietly in her lap. She did not turn around. She did not look for approval. She simply sat there, breathing slowly, as if the world around her needed time to return. Someone near the front shifted their feet. The soft scrape echoed louder than it should have. A few people blinked, as if waking from a shared dream. Then one person began to clap. It was hesitant at first. A single pair of hands, unsure, almost apologetic. The sound felt small in the large hall, but it carried meaning. Another joined in, then another. Within seconds, the quiet applause grew stronger, fuller. It spread through the crowd like a wave, surprising even those who were clapping. Some people smiled in disbelief. Others nodded to themselves, as if confirming what they had just witnessed was real. The woman stiffened slightly at the sound. She was not used to applause. It felt too big, too direct. She stood slowly, pushing the bench back with care so it would not scrape. Loudly across the floor, she turned to face the room. Dozens of eyes met hers. Not with laughter this time. Not with judgment, with respect. Her first instinct was to look away. She lowered her head and offered a small, polite nod, the kind given out of habit. Her cheeks felt warm. The applause continued. Some people clapped harder now. A few whistled softly. Others simply watched her, their expressions open and moved. The group that had encouraged her to play stood quietly near the piano. They were no longer smiling. One of them looked down at the floor, clearly uncomfortable. Another rubbed the back of his neck, unsure of where to look. What had begun as a joke had turned into something they could not undo. The woman took a step back from the piano, creating distance between herself and the attention. She picked up her coat from the bench and held it close, as if it might protect her from the eyes on her. Someone near the front spoke up. That was beautiful. The words were simple, but they landed with weight. She looked up briefly, meeting the speaker's eyes, then nodded again. Thank you, she said softly. Her voice was barely louder than before, but people leaned in to hear it. Another person added, I didn't know a piano like that could sound like that. She gave a small, thoughtful smile. You just have to listen to what it can do, she replied. Her answer was honest. It was also how she had lived her life. The applause slowly faded, but the attention did not. People whispered to one another, sharing reactions, replaying the moment in their heads. I thought it was broken. I've never heard anything like that here. I didn't expect that at all. The woman felt the weight of those words pressing in from all sides. She shifted her coat over her arm and took another step away, clearly preparing to leave. One of the people from the earlier group cleared his throat. Hey, he said, his voice no longer playful. I didn't know you could actually play. The words sounded awkward, even to him. She paused, then turned slightly toward him. That's okay, she said. You didn't have to. It was not said with anger. Just truth. He nodded, embarrassed. Still, that was really something. She accepted the comment with a quiet nod and nothing more. The crowd slowly began to loosen, people returning to their own lives, though many kept looking back at her, as if afraid the moment might disappear once they turned away. A few people approached her cautiously. Do you play often? Someone asked. She shook her head. Not much anymore. Why not? Another asked. She thought about the question for a second. Life gets busy, she said simply. They nodded, understanding more than she had said. A child tugged gently on her sleeve. Can you play again someday? The child asked. The woman smiled more fully this time. Maybe, she said. If the piano lets me. The child grinned and ran back to their parent. The woman took one last look at the piano. It sat quietly now, unchanged, still old and worn. But it felt different to her, as if it had been seen for the first time in a long while. She reached out and touched the edge of it lightly. A silent thank you. Then she turned and walked away. People watched her go. Some still clapping softly, others simply standing in thought. The hall slowly returned to its usual noise. But something lingered beneath it. The group that had started the prank stood together. Quieter than before? That didn't go how I thought it would, one of them muttered. No, another said. Not even close. They looked at the piano, then at the space where the woman had been. None of them laughed as she moved toward the exit. The woman felt her heartbeat begin to slow. The noise of the hall wrapped around her again, familiar and safe. She pulled her coat tighter and blended back into the crowd, yet something inside her had shifted. For the first time in a long while, she felt lighter. Not proud exactly, but settled. As if a part of her that had been quiet for too long had finally been allowed to speak. Outside, the air felt cooler. She paused just beyond the doors, taking a deep breath. The city moved around her. Unaware of what had just happened inside, she smiled to herself, a small smile, private and real. She had not meant to change anything, but she had, and though she did not know it yet. The memory of that broken piano would stay with everyone who had heard it, including her. The days that followed felt ordinary on the surface. But something subtle had changed. The woman returned to her quiet routine, waking early, moving through her hours without drawing attention. From the outside, nothing about her life looked different. She still walked with the same steady pace, still spoke only when needed, still blended easily into crowds, yet inside, the memory of that afternoon stayed close. Sometimes, while waiting in line or sitting alone, she would hear the echo of those notes in her mind. Not the sound of the piano itself, but the feeling of it. The way the room had gone still. The way people had listened. She had not planned for any of it. She told herself it was just a moment. Something small that happened and passed. Life was full of moments like that, most of them forgotten. Still, this one refused to fade. Back at the hall, the broken piano remained where it was. People walked past it every day, but now they looked at it differently. Some slowed their steps. A few stopped and pressed a key or two, curious. Others told friends about the woman who had played there. Even if they didn't know who she was or where she had gone, she made it sound alive. Someone would say it didn't even seem broken anymore. Another would answer. The piano had not changed. The people had. Those who had witnessed. The moment carried it with them in quiet ways. One person found themselves listening more closely to street musicians. Another thought twice before judging someone by how they looked. A few felt a small sting of regret, remembering how icily they had laughed. The group who had started the prank never spoke of it loudly. The memory surfaced at odd times, reminding them of how wrong they had been. It made them quieter, more careful. As for the woman, she did not tell anyone what had happened. There was no one she felt the need to explain it to. She didn't seek praise or recognition. That had never been her way. But one evening, alone in her small living space, she opened an old cover and revealed a keyboard she hadn't touched in years. Dust coated the surface. A few keys stuck. It was far from perfect. She sat down slowly, resting her hands where they felt most natural. For a long moment, she didn't play. Then she pressed a key. The sound was simple. Quiet, imperfect. She smiled. She played softly. Not for anyone else, not for applause or surprise, just for herself. The music filled the room, gentle and honest. It reminded her why she had loved playing in the first place. She realized then that the afternoon at the hall had not given her something new. It had returned something she had almost forgotten. Confidence does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes as permission. Permission to be seen. Permission to take space. Permission to share what lives quietly inside. Days later, back at the hall, someone placed a small note near the piano. It wasn't official. Just a piece of paper taped carefully to the side. It read, "If you know how to play, don't be afraid to try. Read." People smiled when they saw it. From time to time, someone would sit down and play a few notes. Most were not great. Some were barely passable. But no one laughed. The hall had learned something, and so had the woman. She never returned to play there again. She didn't need to. The moment had already done what it was meant to do. Still, whenever she passed through a crowded place, she walked a little taller. Not much. Just enough. She understood now that being quiet did not mean being small, and that sometimes the most unexpected voices are the ones that stay with us the longest. Somewhere, the broken piano waited, and somewhere else, a simple woman carried music with her. No longer hidden, the room had been shocked that day. But the greatest change had happened quietly. Inside her,